So content planning has to be really difficult and hard, true or false? Obviously, by the title of this, you know that what I'm going to say is false because the title is Content Planning. Keep it simple, sweetie. I think there's so many parts of our businesses where we think things have to be harder or that as we grow, they need to be more complicated. And what I want to talk about today is content planning and how simple it can be. And I'm going to give you a bit of a look behind the scenes at what's working for me now. And I think you will be surprised at how simple and not complicated it is. So last week we talked about content and we jammed on a little bit more of the what and the why, and why I think content is just such a great way for all of us to market our businesses. And today we're going to get more into that how. So if any of you are on my blog, you probably, hey Jennifer, talking all about content, particularly around planning and scheduling today. And I'm going to share the really stupid simple way that I plan and organize my content and where I'm coming up with these ideas. So let me know if you have any questions. So I think if any of you guys get my blog, you probably know or probably see that I send out a weekly blog every Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think I'm rounding the corner on about 100 blogs. Oh, good. I'm glad this is something you need. So I do this every Friday, and it used to be at the start of my business that Thursday would roll around and I would just be so stressed out. I'd be full of anxiety because I wouldn't know what to say, wouldn't know what I wanted to write. I'd be up until 2 or 3 in the morning coming up with this content, writing out my blog, editing it, doing all the different scheduling parts of it. Now, clearly, that is not what I'm going to recommend today. Clearly, that's not sustainable. It was killing the joy in creating content, but it was very much my reality at the start of my business, especially when I still had a full 9-to-5 job. So that is what I used to do. I don't recommend that. What I do now and what is working for me now is at the start of every month, I take some time. I did this just at the beginning of December, and I map out 4 to 8 weeks ahead. So some people swear by mapping out 6 months to a year of content ahead. If you are doing that, if you can do that, amen, bless you, that's beautiful. Absolutely stick with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I find for me, and as I think there's a lot of creatives in this group, you can let me know if this resonates with you. I find for me when I plan that far in advance with where I'm at in my business now and with how my mind works, I tend to just muss up the schedule and it ends up just being a schedule that I don't stick to at all. So what works for me is sitting down at the beginning of the month and coming up with 4 to 8 weeks of content ahead of time. And when I'm doing this, what I'm doing is I'm looking at each date, so each of those Fridays where I know it's going out at 8 a.m., and I'm coming up with a specific topic. I'm getting as clear as I can on a title. Often the title changes, but I'm getting pretty clear on that title. And then I can't plan that far out either. Too much anxiety, Jennifer says. I'm the same way. My mind, I also feel like the creative part of me gets feisty and mad, and it's I don't want to stick to that plan. So 4 to 8 weeks, I find for me, allows me to have that structure and that plan in place, but it still lets that creative part of me feel like it has some room to play, feel like it has some room for spontaneity, feel like it can get into the flow. So I'm scheduling these out. I schedule them with the date, with a tentative title, and any notes I have. So any insights or hits I already have on what I want to share around that topic, I'm making that note for myself. Hey, Shalkia. Hey, Shalkia, by the way, guys, that's my mama. She's awesome. So hi to my mom. She's watching. So I'm linking those to the date when I'm doing this. So I find this really helps when I sit down to write because I've already got an outline in place of what I want to do. So let me pull up here. I want to make sure I'm getting all the notes here. Okay. So where am I pulling these ideas from? I think it's great to talk about scheduling, but what about these ideas? Where are they coming from? So when I'm sitting down, I like to really think about, so a couple times a year, I do a big brainstorming session. I do, I'd say 3 to 4 times a year. I schedule out some time. I'm doing just a brainstorm. I get a pen and paper. I have a notebook that I keep it in. It's actually right on here on my desk. You guys can see it. This is my content. This is actually from a client and friend. So I go in here with my brainstorm session and I get messages on my phone. And I just word vomit. I word vomit all the ideas for content, all my ideas for courses. And throughout the year, I tend to get more inspiration, more ideas. I jot them in my phone. I have notes on my desk I'll save that I will then transfer into this notebook. So that when I go down at the beginning, sit down at the beginning of the month to schedule my content, I'm not going in blind. I'm not going in just trying to come up with ideas. I pull this out and I look through here and I'm able to have some ideas for what I want to plan with my content moving forward. And what's great is when I'm looking in this notebook, a lot of times seeing some of those ideas that maybe I came up with 6 months ago will spur a new idea, or I'll have a different way to look at it, which will really help with that planning. Now, what's going in here? I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about my clients. I'm thinking about my audience. And I'm really thinking about, what do they need to hear? What are their questions? What are their concerns? Jennifer says, I brain dump in my notebook and organize them into Evernote. Yeah, that's a great way. So everyone has a different way of organizing. This is what works. I'm definitely a pen and paper person, but if you're someone who likes spreadsheets or likes to have the computer, absolutely, like what works for you. And there's different ways for all of us. I definitely like to get that brain dump, like Jennifer says, in the notebook first. So I'm thinking, though, when I'm doing this, I'm definitely thinking about, what questions have I heard? What concerns are coming up? What tools are people lacking? I'm also thinking about, what tools do I have to share? What are my strengths? Is that still working? Okay. I'm thinking about what I have to share with people. And I'm putting those two pieces into those content ideas. So that's where I'm pulling ideas from. I'm also looking at specific topics. If it's a topic I'm really passionate about, if it's a topic I've shared about previously, I'm thinking about, what else do I have to say about this? What other angle do I have on this topic? What is my unique perspective on it? There are certain topics where, like, what is something I feel really emotional about it? Is there a vulnerable piece to that speaks to me in my life experience? Or is there something that maybe I'm a little frustrated? I think frustration as an emotion can be a great place to write or create content from. So I'm tapping into those emotions as well when I'm looking at these different topics. And sometimes that will help me to have a slightly different insight or angle when I'm sharing something. Obviously, not everything is emotional. I'm talking about content today. That's not emotional. But that's where I'm looking at when I'm coming up with these ideas. So after I pull that all together, I like to, you can see my whiteboard behind me here. I am very visual, so I like to map it out in the whiteboard so I can see that flow of the schedule of my content. So I personally like to look at the different pillars of my business. So I have a couple different things in my business I address, and I like to mix my topics up so that I'm not just addressing one topic for 4 weeks straight. So I'm not just addressing, for example, mindset for 2 months, or we're not just talking about content, for example, for 3 weeks. I like to try to mix that content up so that there's a nice flow. Some people I know like to theme their months, and that's beautiful. If that's something you like to do, absolutely, that works as well. This is what I find works for me. This also, for me, again, with that creative part of me that doesn't like to always do the same thing, it helps me to mix it up. I also have a interview that I schedule out each month, so I look at that schedule and see where that's coming into play. So that helps me with that flow. The exception to that is when I'm sharing a series of content like this. So this, for example, this content planning piggybacked off of last week, which was around the how, of the what and the why of content. So that's a series of content. So that isn't going to be those different pillars. The other time I make an exception with this is when I know I'm launching something, or I'm promoting something, or I'm going to speak to something specific coming up. I like to make sure that my content leading up to that has a flow, that it makes sense. So I'm not just suddenly coming out of nowhere with this promotion, that I've led up to it with some content that supports it. So that is that exception to mixing it up for me. And again, this is what works for me. You might have something different that works for you. I'm sharing this so that you can see how simple it is, and also maybe to give you some ideas on some different ways that you can try to organize and plan your content, and just what the method behind the madness is. So what I find that is helpful, because I'm scheduling these 4 to 8 weeks in advance, often when I'm sitting down at the beginning of the month, so for example, this month at December, when I sat down, because I had about 4 weeks scheduled out ahead of time, I already knew it was coming up this month, so I was adding to that for the month of January when I was sitting down to schedule. So I really only had to create 4 new topics, and I was able to see how those played with each other. So I was able to see what I had planned for December already. Did that make sense still? And those new topics I was adding in, what was that flow going to look like? And again, I just put it up on my whiteboard. really simple, like really, really simple. Now, how does this benefit me? I know when I first heard about planning and organizing and scheduling content, the creative part of me was really resistant to it because I thought it was going to kill my spontaneity. It also seemed a little counterproductive to me because it felt like a whole lot of time spent on planning and not doing. So I will share, if any of you are feeling that way, that taking the time to sit down and plan this actually saves me a whole lot of time. Hey, we've got Angela. Hey, how are you? We're talking all about content and content planning, and talking about how the really simple way in which I schedule my content. And I'm just sharing that I used to be really resistant to this because I thought, quite honestly, that planning this content was going to just be a waste of time. Like, why not just sit down and do the work? But I find that by creating this plan, I'm actually saving myself so much time, because instead of spending 2 or 3 hours just trying to come up with an idea, I already know exactly what I am talking about when I sit down to create that content. The other thing I find that I think is fascinating, it's a bit of a fringe benefit to scheduling this content ahead of time, is I'm creating an incubation. Jennifer says, I need the balance of planning content and writing the flow. Absolutely, me too. So this is what I find planning actually how it helps us get in the flow. So when we create this content plan for ourselves, we give ourselves an incubation period. Talked about this before a little bit, but essentially our brain hates to have an open loop. So when we give it an open loop, when we give it a problem, it will continue to work on it subconsciously for us. So when we're creating that plan of content, of that schedule that we're going to work on, I find what happens is while I'm going about my day-to-day life, while I'm going on a walk, while I'm working with clients, while I'm on the subway, my subconscious mind is continuing to work on this problem. So oftentimes, a lot of ideas of how I want to share this content is coming to me when I'm doing something else. I'm also, because it's happening to a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, which I won't get too much into that, but it's the part of our brain that filters in what we pay attention to. That part of my brain is paying attention to things in my life that will feed into this content. So I find, without even trying, I'm noticing quotes or articles, I'm noticing life events, I'm noticing little tidbits that feed into that content. So by the time I sit down to create the content, half of the work's done for me. It's almost like it writes itself, because my subconscious has been in that incubation period to work on it while I'm not. Adam Grant talks about this in The Originals, if you guys have read that. I don't know if you have. It's a great book, but he talks about how a lot of artists do this intentionally. They will leave their work unfinished. So like halfway through writing, for example, they'll leave a sentence unfinished, go off and do something else, and they'll find that their mind solves that problem or finishes that work for them. That's why all of us, if we're trying to figure something out, you'll find a lot of times you get the answer when you're in the shower or doing those dishes. So I find creating this content schedule, having this plan, seeing it up on my board every day, I'm creating those open loops in my mind. So my mind is working on that subconsciously, and that really helps me to get into that flow. Angela says, thanks for adding me. I've got a few minutes to kill. Oh, that's fine. You run when your client arrives. Thanks for hanging with us, and let me know if you have any questions about this, and you can always come back and watch it later. Glad to have you here. So happy to have you here. So Jennifer, I know you were talking about the flow of content. I'll share how I get this content done, because I think having, and this is part of where the flow piece comes in, I think having a schedule and planning, it's the same with goals. It's great, but it's just a structure. We still have to get the work done. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of empty words. It's just a pretty schedule on a whiteboard that doesn't do anything. So what I do, and this is what works for me, I batch my time. And I know batching is nothing new or revelatory, but I'm going to talk about it because it works. So I batch my time. Now, some people like to theme their days and schedule the days of their week, so they'll have one day for all content. For me, I can't do that right now currently in my business. The way I have my clients scheduled, the way my workflow goes, I can't schedule out a whole day. So I like to batch blocks of time within my week to create content. I currently schedule 2 blocks of time. I schedule 1 block of time for my blog or this video to create that content, any email sequences if I'm working on a course, any material like that. And then I also like to schedule a block of time for that social media content. I make separate blocks of time for that. And what I do is when I sit down with that block of time, I turn off all distractions. So the opposite of what happened when we were talking earlier, where my phone was ringing 5 times, I turn my phone into airplane mode. I go into my computer, there's a sleep mode in your computer. I don't know if you knew that, but put my computer into sleep mode. I close my email out. I close Facebook out. I close all the tabs out so there are no distractions. I have a blog if you want to read it all about how much multitasking just kills our flow. It kills our productivity. It makes us stupid. So I close everything out. Jennifer said she started creating an outline when she comes up with an idea. That way you're not looking at a blank page. Absolutely. I think having an outline can be great. I'm someone who an outline weirdly stops me, but I think some people think we fall into two camps. Some of us are like word vomiters and the other are outline people. If you're an outline person, absolutely an outline can be so helpful. If you're more of a word vomiter like me, I find I need to just like have that idea and then just be able to like blah everything out and then go and organize it afterwards. So it's fine, I think, if we fall into either camp. So when I'm sitting down, you're both. I think a lot of us can definitely be both or swing from both one side to the other. I think my schedule is my way of trying to be a little bit more of both. So I find with batching, what works for me when I'm creating this content is to set out that block of time. So let's say I have 2.5 hours. I've turned off all the distractions. I set a timer on my phone. So let's say I have 2.5 hours. I'll set a timer for 45 minutes. And that 45 minutes, I sit down. It's like a modified version of the Pomodoro technique, if you've heard of that. I set my timer for 45 minutes. I'm not allowed to get up unless I have to pee, and I actually have to really pee, not like as an excuse. Other than that, I sit down, sit my butt down, and I work for 45 minutes. When the timer goes off, I see where I'm at. If I'm in flow, if it's like coming out of me and it's great, I set the timer again and I don't get up. If I'm like really stuck and I'm having a hard time, I set the timer for 5 to 10 minutes and I take a break. I go make a cup of coffee, get a cup of tea, go for, a lap around my apartment, short break, and then I come back, I set the timer again. And I do that until that time period is finished. When I sit down, I give myself the intention, timers make you anxious, don't use a timer then. This is what works for me. Absolutely don't use a timer then. I find having the timer, I know that I've got a block. I sometimes really get into flow and I will lose track of time. So if I don't have a timer, then I will miss maybe an upcoming client call or not realize what I have next because I very intentionally block this time off for myself. So timer helps me. If it doesn't work for you, absolutely don't work it. Jennifer says, I time block and leave flexibility. Yeah, flexibility, absolutely. And I'm going to talk about that in just one second. I have a thought about that. Me too with being in the flow. Yeah, it's great. Flow is awesome. You like lose all sense of everything around you. But if you have an upcoming client or an upcoming call, or something you have to do, for me, I need to have that timer to pull me back into reality. So that's the flow of how I get this content finished. I like to give myself that deadline, and I find that most of the time with that deadline, because I know, let's say the blog has to be finished, I'm creating that content within that block of time. Often I'm finished early. Absolutely the flexibility, absolutely if I need time to go back to it. But creativity, I find, actually does well with a little bit of a constraint around a little bit of a deadline. I think it actually forces our brain to come up with some of those ideas. And then as far as flexibility goes, I will say that with all of this, I think rules are meant to be broken once we know what the rules are. I find this with writing and grammar. When I used to act, I found that those rules were meant to be broken after I learned them. I think even the rules in dating, they're meant to be broken once we know them, when we're intentional about them. So all of this for me is very much a structure. It's a framework or a guideline. It is not written in stone, and I give myself full permission to break this rule or to break this structure or plan if I need to. So often I will have something that is speaking to me that I just feel like I need to share, or something will come up with some clients that I really want to address. And if that's the case, I'll write it, I will take a look at what my schedule looks like, make sure that it fits in with the flow I have, and I absolutely give myself permission to share something that is off topic or not scheduled. So for example, I shared that hashtag, the hashtag cheat sheet in that blog a few weeks ago. That was not scheduled or planned for content. That was something that had come up with a few clients, and I wanted them to have an easy tool, and I didn't want them to have to wait 2 months to get that tool till I had a slot in my schedule. So I created it. It was around Thanksgiving. There were a couple things. I actually had this planned, so I moved this content forward a little bit. I put it in easy, no big deal. So that's what I mean as far as saying, like, this doesn't have to be complicated. think scheduling can be really easy, but I think having that schedule really does help save us so much time and give us that intentionality and that focus when we sit down to work, because we know what the heck we're doing. So definitely that flexibility, and definitely give yourself permission to break those rules. It's absolutely fine. I'm trying to think if there was anything else here that I wanted. Can I put my computer's frozen? That I wanted to share with you guys around how I plan content. Do you have any questions? I know we've got 2 people live right now. Do you have any questions around this? If so, pop them below. And if not, I think that's everything I wanted to share with you just around how I plan and schedule the content. I'd say that the main thing for me with all of this is that it is really simple. I think with all things in our business, we want to keep things as simple as possible. There's no reason to make anything harder than it needs to be. I think so much of it is about finding what works for you. So this is what works for me. If it resonates with you, take it, steal it. If it doesn't, you have something that works, stick with that. And if there's a few pieces, take that and you can work with your schedule and see what works for you. But it's finding what works and then rinse and repeat. Don't mess with it if you have something that's working. And I think always it's simplifying and finding the simplest way to do what we're doing. There is absolutely no reason to complicate things, and there's no reason as our businesses grow that we need to make things more complicated. I think they can just continue to get more simplified and more streamlined. So I absolutely believe that. I absolutely hope that this helps you with some thoughts around how to organize, how to plan content, how to come up with those content ideas. If you're not planning, if you're not scheduling, I hope it will inspire you to give it a try and to see how it works for you. I will just remind you that it will not kill your creativity. It won't kill your flow. It won't kill that spontaneity. I find it actually helps with my flow and with that creative process, because that stress of having to come up with an idea and that anxiety of meeting a deadline has been removed, because now it's very easy for me to get ahead of my content and just to know what's coming up. We've got, oh, hey Mary, just finishing this up, so you're going to have to catch this on the replay, but I've been talking all about content and content planning and scheduling. So if you have any questions you want to throw below for me before I go, let me know. And if not, anyone who does watch this on the replay, or if you have a question that comes for you later, absolutely just throw that below. And I put a link to the written blog of this, so those ideas are all organized for you in case that helps you. And for any of you watching this on the replay, for all of you watching this now, I thank you for joining me. If you do leave me a question, tag me, because I don't always see them afterwards. And then I want to wish you a happy day, happy weekend. I'm next week, so here's the irony. I have organized and planned all my content. I'm finished with my content for the year, but I have not finished planning my holiday travel. So next Friday, I think that I'm going to be traveling, but I'm not sure. So I might not be live next Friday with you guys, in which case I'll pop in a little earlier in the week to say hi and to share some stuff with you. But I do have some content I'll be sharing, and I'll definitely be popping into the group. Happy weekend to you too, Jennifer. Thank you everyone for watching. Happy weekend. I hope this was helpful for you. I'm sending you all lots of love, and I'm wishing you your version of success. Thank you for being here.